Iran is probably the most important issue on our agenda today. I know a lot of people are torn because of the various issues that attract our attention today, presidential elections, the economic woes that beset our economy today, so many other issues that attract our attention and compete against apathy, indifference, and ignorance, which seem to be so rampant. We have paid a heavy price in the past when we failed to take the words of dictators seriously. Ahmadinejad means what he says, and he says what he means, and he's seeking the means to implement it with his nuclear weapons program. We have an obligation, not just to ourselves, but to future generations, to respond and to act, and to prevent Ahmadinejad from seeking the fulfillment of his aspirations, hegemony in the region, imposition of his radical Islamic extremist ideology. We see what he has done in his own country with the persecution of minorities, the execution of children, the leading executioner of children in the world, of women, the way that he has persecuted students and other dissidents, minority groups. He is the leading state sponsor of terror around the world. One need only look at his support for Hamas and Hezbollah, whose avowed purpose is the destruction of Israel, to understand how serious Ahmadinejad is about destroying the Jewish state and, as he said, wiping it off the map along with the United States. I know that people get tired. They've heard about Ahmadinejad now for years. We have seen the negotiations going on for years. We have seen 3 rounds or 4 rounds of sanctions at the United Nations Security Council, and people say, what good has it done? The answer is that the sanctions do work. And if they would have been implemented from the beginning with the force that was intended and it was necessary, had the Europeans joined the United States in implementing them fully, today the situation might be very different. The economy of Iran is suffering. Today it is engaged in the biggest brain drain in history, according to the World Bank. More than 10% of the population has left. Ahmadinejad is driven by blind hatred. He doesn't care how much his people suffer in order to achieve his goals. He answers to the Mahdi who died in the 9th century. You cannot have rational discussion. We cannot have normal political dialogue with someone who is driven by this kind of an ideology. We have learned from Jewish history. We read recently that Moab and Ammon cannot come into the Jewish people, not even in the 10th generation. Yet others who persecuted us were not subject to such restrictions. Even the Egyptians, we were told, we have to show appreciation for the fact that they welcomed us when Jacob and his sons came there at a time of a famine in Canaan. Hitler was driven by a similar blind hatred. Ammon and Moab were selected for this special treatment because they are driven by a baseless, blind hatred that even put in jeopardy their own vital national interests as they sought to fulfill and were driven by their animosity to the Jews. Hitler, similarly, was driven by blind hatred. And we saw how he diverted munitions, resources, manpower from vital battlefronts just to carry out his maniacal obsession with destroying the Jews. Ahmadinejad is in the same mold. He is willing, as he said, to destroy half of his country in order to destroy the Jewish state. And it's not just the Jewish state. He wants to destroy his neighbors. He has designs on all of them. He wants to reignite the Sunni-Shiite battles, and he believes that you need an apocalypse in order to bring about the return of the Mahdi. We have seen his threats against his neighbors. We have seen his support for terrorism around the world, and we cannot be silent in the face of it. On September 22nd, we have a unique opportunity to declare to the world that we have learned the lessons of the past, that we will not be silent, and that we will demand that world leaders act in concert decisively to bring additional economic sanctions and restrictions on Iran, to isolate Iran in the international community. It is a disgrace that the United Nations allows someone who is in flagrant violation of Security Council resolutions and of the UN Charter by his threats against its member states, is allowed to come and grace its podium. We do not have to accept it. But we do have an obligation to future generations to speak out, to make sure that never again is not just a hallowed chant at rallies, but a pledge that we renew in every generation. So I urge everyone to come out, to be there at 11:45 on Monday at Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza across from the United Nations. This is your opportunity to show that we have learned the lessons of history, that we are a different generation. Moses warned us that the greatest dangers we face are apathy, indifference, and ignorance, not natural disasters or war. Our community all too often has fallen prey to these same trends which seem to dominate in our country. Now is the time to break that hold and to show the world where we stand. Tens of thousands of people of every faith and religion will join us, but they look to us to lead. We look to you to lead.